He gave his horse to a limping giant warrior. At sunrise, uses his barn as a gold vault. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. In the vast, rugged stretches of the American West, there was a man named Thomas, a rancher who lived alone on his humble farm. His life was simple. Wake up at dawn, care for his animals, and keep to himself. He wasn't one to entertain visitors, and his quiet existence seemed as though it would continue that way forever. One afternoon, as he worked near his barn, something unusual caught his eye. A figure limped slowly toward him, the sun casting long shadows over the dirt path. It was a giant of a man, towering over 6 feet tall, with a rugged appearance that spoke of countless battles and hardships. His clothes were torn, and blood stained his leg, a wound that looked deep and painful. The man staggered closer, his steps faltering as he tried to keep his balance. Thomas set down his shovel and approached cautiously. The stranger's face was stern, yet there was a weariness in his eyes, as though he had been traveling for days without rest. Despite the man's imposing presence, there was something in his eyes that conveyed both pain and vulnerability. "I need help," the giant warrior rasped. Thomas didn't hesitate. The rancher knew the risks of helping strangers, especially one as formidable as this, but something in the man's voice, a sense of desperation, stirred his compassion. Thomas had always believed that kindness, even in the harshest of circumstances, was the way forward. Without a second thought, he turned and led the warrior to his barn. Thomas didn't have much, but he knew he had enough to help someone in need. The barn was small, with hay scattered along the floor and the scent of fresh timber in the air. He guided the man to a corner, where the warmth of the barn could offer some comfort. Thomas moved quickly, gathering supplies to clean the wound, but the giant warrior stopped him with a raised hand. "I don't need your pity," the man said, his voice rough but still firm. "I need your horse." Thomas was taken aback for a moment. A horse? He thought. But the warrior's need was clear. He had to escape, and his current condition would make it impossible for him to travel any further on foot. After a brief moment of hesitation, Thomas nodded. "You can have him," he said, his voice steady. "But take care of him. He's the only one I have." The warrior gave a curt nod of gratitude and hobbled toward the stable, where Thomas's horse stood. The giant warrior, although clearly exhausted, managed to mount the horse, and for the first time since his arrival, a small smile appeared on his weathered face. He rode off into the horizon, leaving Thomas standing there, uncertain of what the future would hold. As the evening fell, Thomas thought about the stranger and his horse. Little did he know that at sunrise the next morning, everything would change. The warrior's journey was far from over, and what he had done for Thomas would soon come full circle in a way that no one could have predicted. The morning after the warrior left, Thomas awoke to the sound of the wind howling through the cracks in the barn. He had spent a restless night, wondering what had become of the giant warrior. It seemed strange to him that he had given away his horse without a second thought, but something about the warrior's silent gratitude had made him feel that it was the right thing to do. As the first light of dawn broke through the window of the barn, Thomas stepped outside, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of the warrior. He had no idea that the events of the previous day would soon come to shape his future in a way that he couldn't possibly have imagined. Thomas looked out at his land, the vast stretch of green fields and the small herd of cattle grazing in the distance. It was a peaceful, almost idyllic scene, but there was something stirring in the air that told him it wouldn't last. He felt a strange unease in his chest, as if something was about to change. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, he heard the sound of hooves approaching. At first, he thought it might be another traveler, but the sound grew louder, and he could tell it was the unmistakable rhythm of a large group of horses. His heart raced as he turned to face the sound. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, and within moments, a group of riders emerged from the haze. Thomas squinted, trying to make out who they were. There were at least 20 men, all riding with purpose, their horses moving in unison. As they drew closer, Thomas's eyes widened in shock. At the head of the group was the giant warrior, riding proudly at the front. But now, he was accompanied by dozens of other warriors, all dressed in traditional attire, their faces painted with intricate designs. They were not here to harm him. They were here to honor him. The warrior had returned, not just for a simple thank you, but with something far greater in mind. The warriors slowly rode up to Thomas's barn and dismounted, their movements measured and respectful. The leader of the group, the giant warrior, approached Thomas with a solemn expression. "We have come to repay your kindness," he said, his voice deep and powerful. Thomas stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. The warrior continued, "Your act of generosity has not gone unnoticed. We owe you a great debt, and we will repay it in a way that will secure your future." Thomas looked around, bewildered. What could they possibly mean? The warrior gestured to the group behind him, and one by one, the other riders began to unload crates from their horses. Thomas's mind raced as he realized that the crates were filled with gold. "This is your reward," the warrior said, his voice steady. "We have brought this gold as a symbol of our gratitude, and it is yours to keep." Thomas's jaw dropped. He had never seen so much wealth in his life. But as he looked around at the warriors, he realized that this was not just a gift. It was something far more significant. The warriors were offering him a chance to build something that would change his life forever. They weren't just giving him gold. They were giving him power, influence, and security. As the sun continued to rise, Thomas stood there, still in disbelief. The warriors began to move with purpose, unloading the crates and stacking them inside his barn. The barn, which had once been a simple structure for housing animals and tools, was now becoming a vault for gold. It was a transformation that Thomas could never have predicted. The warriors worked silently but efficiently, and before long, the barn was filled to the brim with the precious metal. When they finished, the giant warrior turned to Thomas once more. "You are now one of us," he said. "This gold is yours, but it comes with a responsibility. You are part of our tribe now, and we expect you to stand with us when we call upon you." Thomas could hardly believe his ears. In the span of one day, he had gone from a simple rancher to the owner of a gold vault, with the loyalty and respect of a tribe of warriors. It was a gift beyond anything he could have imagined, and it all began with a simple act of kindness, a gift he had given without expecting anything in return. As the warriors left, disappearing into the distance, Thomas stood alone in the barn, his mind reeling with the enormity of what had just happened. His life had changed in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend, and the future was now full of possibilities. But one thing was certain. The kindness he had shown the warrior had set off a chain of events that would echo through his life forever. The days that followed the arrival of the warriors were filled with both excitement and confusion for Thomas. He had always lived a life of simplicity, but now he found himself surrounded by gold and the loyalty of a tribe he barely understood. The giant warrior had left him with more than just a gift of wealth. He had left him with a responsibility that weighed heavily on his shoulders. As the weeks passed, Thomas worked to understand the true nature of the gold he had been given. It wasn't just a windfall. It was a symbol of something far greater. The warriors, though they had promised their allegiance to him, were also testing him. They had shown him kindness, but now they were waiting for him to prove that he was worthy of their trust. Every morning, Thomas would wake up early to check on the gold, making sure it was secure in the barn, now reinforced with stronger walls to hold the precious metal. The tribe's presence in the area had become more pronounced as well. The once quiet land was now filled with the sounds of warriors training, hunting, and preparing for battles. Their presence, while reassuring, was also a reminder that Thomas was no longer just a rancher. He was part of something much larger than himself. One evening, as the sun set and the air grew cooler, Thomas received an unexpected visit. It was the giant warrior, once again alone. His eyes were serious as he approached, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the barn. "Thomas," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We have been watching you, and we are pleased with your actions. But now, the true test comes. A group of men who seek to take what is ours has been spotted near your land. They will come for you, and when they do, you must decide what kind of man you truly are." Thomas felt a chill run through him. He had heard rumors of outlaws and bandits in the area, but he had never imagined they would target him. The warrior continued, "You have a choice to make. You can stand with us and defend what you now own, or you can let them take it from you. If you choose to stand, we will be with you, but if you hesitate, we will not be able to protect you." The weight of the decision pressed down on Thomas. For the first time in his life, he realized that he was no longer just a man with a ranch. He was a part of something that had the power to change the course of his future. As night fell, Thomas sat in his small cabin, staring at the flickering fire. He thought about the warriors, about the gold, and about the promise he had made to himself to always live with integrity. He knew that he couldn't let fear control him. He had been given a chance to make a difference not just for himself, but for the land he now called home. The next morning, as the sun rose and the warriors gathered in preparation for the confrontation, Thomas made his decision. He would stand with them. He would fight for what was his, and he would prove that kindness, when given the chance, could lead to something far more powerful than gold. As the warriors mounted their horses, Thomas joined them, his heart filled with a newfound determination. The battle ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a man of honor, a protector of his land, and a leader in his own right. The dust began to settle as the warriors rode off, and Thomas followed them into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. As the days passed, the tension in the air grew thicker. Thomas had made his decision, and the warriors had gathered to defend what was now his. But as he stood with them, looking out over the horizon, he realized that the true test of his resolve was just beginning. The land that had once been his sanctuary was now the focal point of a battle that could change everything. He had never been a fighter, nor had he ever envisioned himself as a man of war. But now, standing side by side with the warriors who had pledged their loyalty to him, he felt a fire in his chest, a sense of duty that ran deeper than anything he had ever known. The group rode through the day and into the night, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows over the landscape. As they neared the area where the bandits were rumored to be camped, Thomas could see the first signs of trouble, smoke rising from the trees, a telltale sign that someone was nearby. His heart raced as the warriors slowed their horses, preparing for whatever lay ahead. The giant warrior, who had become both a protector and a mentor to Thomas, turned to him and said, "Stay close, Thomas. You are with us now. You've earned the right to stand beside us, but you must be ready for what comes." Thomas nodded, though his palms were slick with sweat. The sound of hooves echoed through the trees as they approached the camp. The bandits were not expecting them, and as the warriors surrounded the camp, the bandits scrambled in panic. Thomas felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. This wasn't the life he had chosen, but it was the life he was living now. The bandits, seeing the strength of the warriors and the resolve in Thomas's eyes, knew they were outmatched. The leader of the bandits, a grizzled man with a scar across his face, stepped forward, raising his hands in surrender. "We came for the gold," he spat, "but it seems we miscalculated." The giant warrior stepped forward, his presence intimidating. "You came for more than just gold. You came to take what doesn't belong to you. Now you'll pay for that mistake." Thomas, who had been standing silently beside the warrior, finally spoke. "This land is mine now, and no one will take it from me." His voice was firm, steady, as if the weight of his decision had finally settled in his chest. The leader of the bandits sneered, but before he could say another word, the giant warrior raised his hand, signaling the end of the confrontation. The bandits were outnumbered and outmatched, and they quickly yielded. The warriors tied them up and prepared to take them back to the town for justice. As Thomas stood there, his heart still pounding, he realized that the gold, the warriors, and the land were not the only things he had gained. He had gained a sense of purpose, a bond with the tribe that would last beyond this moment. As they rode back to the ranch, the golden sunlight of the evening began to fade, and Thomas found himself looking at the land with new eyes. It was no longer just a place to call home. It was a place where he had fought for what was right, and in doing so, had become something more. The warriors who had once been strangers were now his allies, his brothers in arms. The land he had inherited through kindness and perseverance was now a symbol of strength and resilience. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Thomas looked up, filled with a sense of peace that he had never known before. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a man who had proven his worth, who had stood firm in the face of danger, and who had earned the respect of those who had once been his enemies. And as the firelight flickered in the distance, Thomas knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but it was a journey he was ready to face. As weeks passed, the land began to feel more like home to Thomas, but the shadows of uncertainty still lingered. The warriors had stayed with him, helping him rebuild and fortify the ranch, transforming it into a formidable stronghold. They had become more than just allies. They were his family, and the once silent ranch had now become a bustling center of activity. The gold, carefully stored in the barn, had become a symbol of what they had achieved together. But even as peace settled over the land, Thomas knew that it was only temporary. His heart ached with the knowledge that more threats were looming. The bandits who had once tried to take everything from him were not the only ones watching. The news of Thomas's newfound wealth had spread across the region, and with it came rumors of larger, more dangerous forces. A new group of outlaws, ruthless and bloodthirsty, was making its way toward the ranch. This time, Thomas wouldn't have the element of surprise on his side. He had been warned. His loyal warrior, the giant who had saved him time and time again, had returned to deliver the grim news. "They're coming for everything you've worked for, Thomas," the warrior said, his tone heavy with urgency. "We can't protect this land forever. The world is a dangerous place, and it's only a matter of time before others come looking for what you have." Thomas stared at the warrior, the weight of his words sinking in. The once quiet and isolated life he had known was now a thing of the past. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. He had to make a choice, stand and fight, or lose everything. "I can't do this alone," Thomas said, his voice tight with determination. The warrior nodded. "You won't be alone. We stand with you, as we always have. But this time, we will need more than just gold to protect what's ours. We will need strength, unity, and resolve." Thomas looked out over the ranch, the fields stretching out before him. He knew that he couldn't back down. He had fought for this land, for his place in the world, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. "Then we fight," Thomas said, his voice steady and strong. "We'll defend this land with everything we have." In the days that followed, Thomas prepared for the battle ahead. The warriors trained harder, their skills sharpened by the knowledge that they were about to face an enemy like none before. They fortified the barn and the surrounding buildings, making sure that no one could simply walk in and take what they had fought so hard to build. As the day of the attack drew near, Thomas found himself growing restless. He had never been a fighter, never had to face the kind of battle that awaited him. But he had come to understand the warrior's way. Fight for what is right, protect those who cannot protect themselves, and never back down in the face of adversity. The morning of the attack arrived, and Thomas stood with the warriors at the edge of the ranch, watching as the dust cloud on the horizon grew larger. The outlaws were almost here. The warriors lined up, their weapons ready, their faces set with determination. Thomas felt a surge of adrenaline in his chest as he joined them, his heart pounding in his ears. The giant warrior stood by his side, his towering figure a symbol of strength and courage. "Remember, Thomas," the warrior said, his voice calm, yet filled with purpose. "You have the heart of a warrior. Trust in that." As the outlaws neared, Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about gold or land. It was about standing up for what was right, protecting the people he cared about, and proving that kindness could turn into something far greater. The battle was about to begin, and Thomas was ready. The first sounds of hooves pounding against the earth reached Thomas's ears as he stood with the warriors, his heart racing with the anticipation of what was to come. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow over the ranch, but Thomas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. The outlaws were almost here. The dust cloud on the horizon grew thicker, signaling the arrival of the enemy, and Thomas felt a surge of adrenaline that made his hands shake. The warriors around him were calm, their eyes focused, their grips steady on their weapons. They were ready. Thomas, however, was not sure if he was ready. He had never fought a battle like this before, never had to defend something so precious. But one thing he knew for certain. He could not let the land he had fought so hard to claim be taken away. As the sound of hooves grew louder, the warriors moved into position. The giant warrior who had been by his side since the beginning looked at Thomas, his expression grim, but full of encouragement. "Remember, Thomas," the giant warrior said, his voice calm but firm. "We fight not just for gold, but for something far more important. We fight for the land, for what is right, and for each other." Thomas nodded, though his heart pounded in his chest. He had the strength of the warriors beside him, but he also knew that this battle would test more than just his physical endurance. It would test his courage, his resolve, and his belief in the promise he had made to protect this place. The outlaws finally appeared in the distance, riding in a formation that was both intimidating and calculated. They had come for what they believed was rightfully theirs, but what they did not know was that Thomas was no longer just a man with a ranch. He was a man with a purpose. As the outlaws approached, their leader, a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes, raised his hand, signaling for his men to halt. The giant warrior stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "You've come for gold," the warrior said, his voice echoing across the land. "But you won't find it here. This land belongs to us, and we won't let you take it." The leader of the outlaws laughed, his voice cruel. "You think you can stop us? You're just a bunch of farmers and warriors. What chance do you have against us?" The giant warrior's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Thomas stepped forward, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "This land is mine," he said. "It's more than just a place to live. It's my home, and I won't let you take it from me." The leader's expression darkened as he studied Thomas. "You're the rancher, then?" he sneered. "You're the one who thinks he can protect all this? You're nothing. Just a man who got lucky." Thomas didn't flinch. He had heard the words of men like this before, men who thought they could take whatever they wanted by force. But he knew that the land was more than just gold or cattle. It was something that connected him to the warriors, to the people who had helped him, and to the legacy he was building. The giant warrior raised his sword, and the others followed suit, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. The battle began. The warriors moved with precision, their training evident as they clashed with the outlaws. Thomas watched, his heart pounding as the fight unfolded before him. The outlaws were fierce, but they were outnumbered. The warriors fought with a purpose, protecting what was theirs, defending the land they had come to love. Thomas stood his ground, his eyes focused on the leader of the outlaws, who was now charging toward him, fury in his eyes. Thomas knew this moment would define him. He gripped his weapon tightly, his breath steady, and as the outlaw leader came closer, Thomas made his move. He swung his weapon with everything he had, meeting the leader's blade in a clash of metal. The sound echoed across the field, but Thomas didn't falter. With each strike, he felt more alive, more certain of his purpose. The leader of the outlaws was strong, but Thomas had something he didn't: resolve. With one final, powerful strike, Thomas disarmed the leader and sent him crashing to the ground. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader defeated, hesitated, and that was all the warriors needed. The battle was won. As the dust settled and the warriors stood victorious, Thomas looked out at the land he had fought so hard to protect. His heart still raced, but there was a sense of peace that washed over him. He had not just defended his ranch. He had proven that kindness, when combined with strength and resolve, could lead to something far greater than gold. He had earned the respect of the warriors, and more importantly, he had earned his place in this land. In the days that followed the battle, Thomas found himself standing on the same land he had once thought would remain untouched, a place of peace and solitude. But now, it was more than that. It was a symbol of his strength, of the life he had built with his own hands. The warriors, who had once come to him as strangers, were now like family, and they worked beside him to make the ranch even stronger. The bond between them had grown, and together they were making sure that no one would ever threaten what they had fought for. Yet even as peace seemed to settle over the land, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. He had fought off the bandits, but the world outside was vast, and there were others who might see his newfound wealth and power as something to be taken. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow over the ranch, the giant warrior who had led the charge approached Thomas with a grim expression. "There's more coming, Thomas," the warrior said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "The outlaws we faced were just a small part of a larger network. Others will come, stronger and more ruthless. We've made enemies, and they will come for the gold, for the land, for everything." Thomas's heart sank. He had known, deep down, that their victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. "What do we do now?" Thomas asked, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. The warrior paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We prepare," he said simply. "We fortify the ranch, train harder, and stay vigilant. But we also need allies. We can't do this alone." The words hit Thomas harder than he expected. He had already put everything on the line, his home, his land, his future, and now he was being told that it still wasn't enough. But he knew the warrior was right. They had to be prepared. In the days that followed, Thomas and the warriors worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses. The barn, once a place to store animals and tools, was now a fortress, with reinforced walls and hidden compartments to keep the gold safe. They built new watchtowers, positioned guards along the perimeter, and set traps in the surrounding woods. Thomas spent hours training alongside the warriors, learning how to fight and defend himself in ways he had never imagined. The once peaceful ranch had transformed into a stronghold, and Thomas was no longer just a rancher. He was a leader, a protector. As the preparations continued, word began to spread that Thomas was no longer a simple farmer who had stumbled into wealth. He was a man who had fought for his place, and now others were starting to take notice. One day, a group of travelers arrived at the ranch. They were rough-looking men, their faces scarred and their eyes wary. They had heard about Thomas's battle against the outlaws and had come to see if the rumors were true. Thomas greeted them with caution but extended his hospitality, offering food and shelter for the night. The travelers, though hardened by years of struggle, could sense the tension in the air. They were not there to cause trouble, but they knew something big was brewing. As the night wore on, one of the men, a weathered old cowboy with a deep voice, pulled Thomas aside. "We've heard about what you've done here," the cowboy said, his voice low. "And I'll be honest with you, we've been watching. The outlaws you fought, those weren't the only ones. There's a bigger gang out there, one that's more organized, more ruthless. They'll come for you, and they'll come for everything you have." Thomas felt a chill run through him. He had hoped that after the battle, things would settle, but the reality was that the danger was far from over. "What do you want?" Thomas asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The cowboy looked him in the eye. "We want to help," he said simply. "You've shown you're a man worth fighting for. And if you want to keep what you've earned, you'll need more than just warriors. You'll need the help of people who know how to fight, people who have survived the same kinds of battles you're facing." It was a hard decision for Thomas. Trusting strangers, especially those who had no ties to the land or to him, was difficult. But he knew that this was no longer just about protecting his gold. It was about protecting the people who had helped him, the land that had become his, and the future he had worked so hard to build. After a long silence, Thomas nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll fight together. I'll stand by you, but I need to know you can be trusted." The cowboy smiled, his eyes glinting with a mix of respect and understanding. "You've got our word," he said. The travelers spent the next few days helping Thomas fortify the ranch further. They showed him new tactics for defense, ways to protect the land, and how to outsmart those who might come after him. As the days passed, Thomas began to see a shift in the air. The battle for the land was far from over, but now, for the first time, he had a sense of hope. He had allies, a group of men and warriors who stood beside him, and together, they would face whatever threats came their way. The days following the arrival of the travelers felt like a turning point for Thomas. He had trusted them with his land, and they had proven themselves worthy allies, showing him new tactics and strategies for defending his ranch. The bond between them and the warriors who had been with him from the start grew stronger. But even as his defenses were strengthened, a looming sense of unease continued to haunt Thomas. The enemy was still out there, and the weight of the future rested on his shoulders. It wasn't just about gold anymore. It was about survival, about standing up for everything he had worked for, and about protecting those who had helped him along the way. The news of the upcoming confrontation spread like wildfire. Word reached every corner of the region that Thomas had become more than just a rancher. He had earned the respect of the people around him, and with that respect came both admiration and envy. The calm, quiet days were over, and Thomas could feel the storm building on the horizon. On the eve of the battle, Thomas stood outside, staring out over the land that had once been his sanctuary. It was now his battlefield. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields, and Thomas felt a sense of resolve settle in his chest. He had made it this far, and he wasn't about to let it all slip away. He turned to the warriors and travelers who stood by his side. They were ready, their eyes focused, their weapons sharp. The air was thick with anticipation. The giant warrior who had been by his side since the beginning approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is it, Thomas," the warrior said, his voice calm, yet filled with the weight of the moment. "We've come a long way, and now we fight together." Thomas nodded, grateful for the warrior's strength and support. "I'm ready," he replied, his voice steady despite the nerves churning in his stomach. The outlaws would be coming soon, and Thomas knew that the battle would be fierce. But he also knew that they had the advantage of unity, and that was something no enemy could easily overcome. The warriors had trained for this moment, and the travelers had shown them ways to defend their land that Thomas had never imagined. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the hours passed and the night deepened, Thomas stood with his allies, waiting for the first signs of the enemy. The tension was palpable, the stillness of the night broken only by the occasional sound of a distant horse's hooves. Then, just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, the sound of approaching riders filled the air. The outlaws had arrived. There were more of them than Thomas had expected, and they came in full force, their horses thundering across the ground like a wave crashing against the shore. The warriors and travelers quickly took their positions, their faces set in determination. Thomas felt the rush of adrenaline as the first wave of outlaws charged toward them. The warriors met them head-on, their swords flashing in the early light. The battle was chaotic, with the sound of clashing steel and the cries of men filled the air. Thomas stood his ground, his weapon at the ready. He had never fought in a battle like this before, but he felt a surge of courage as he watched the warriors fight with such skill and precision. They were not just defending their land. They were fighting for something greater, something that could not be taken away by force. The battle raged on, and Thomas found himself face to face with the leader of the outlaws. The man was tall, with a cruel smile and cold eyes, but Thomas didn't flinch. He had something the leader didn't: honor and the will to protect what was his. With a swift movement, Thomas swung his weapon, meeting the leader's blade in a fierce clash. The two men struggled, their weapons locked in a battle of strength and will. But Thomas, fueled by the determination to protect everything he had fought for, pushed through. With one final, powerful strike, he disarmed the leader, sending him crashing to the ground. The remaining outlaws hesitated, their morale shattered. They had seen their leader fall, and they knew they were outmatched. With a mix of fear and disbelief, they began to retreat. The warriors, with Thomas leading them, pursued them, pushing the outlaws off the land. The battle was won. As the dust settled and the sun began to rise higher in the sky, Thomas stood among the warriors, his heart still racing from the intensity of the fight. He had fought for his land, for his future, and for the people he had come to care for. And in doing so, he had proven something to himself, that kindness, when combined with strength, could lead to a victory greater than gold. As the warriors began to gather around him, Thomas realized that this land, this life, was now truly his. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would face whatever came next with courage and honor, knowing that he had the strength to protect what was his. As the days passed after the battle, the ranch began to feel more like home than ever before. The land, once just a quiet place for Thomas to work in solitude, now held a deep sense of purpose, a purpose he had fought hard to protect. The warriors, who had been strangers to him not long ago, had become an extension of his family. They worked together, side by side, reinforcing the defenses and ensuring that no one would threaten what they had built. The travelers, now part of the ever-growing circle of allies, remained a steady presence, ready to help at a moment's notice. The outlaws had been driven away, but Thomas knew that peace was fragile, that the world outside his ranch still carried dangers. But despite this knowledge, he stood with a newfound strength. He had earned more than just gold and land. He had earned the respect of those around him and had come to understand the true value of community, trust, and honor. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas stood outside the barn, looking over the land that had become his sanctuary. It wasn't just the land he had fought for, It was the life he had made. The battle had been hard, but it had transformed him. He was no longer the simple rancher who had stumbled upon wealth. He had become something greater, something that could not be taken away by force. He had learned to fight for what was right, and in doing so, he had built a future that he could stand behind with pride. As the seasons changed and the weather grew colder, Thomas began to see the first signs of growth. The ranch thrived, its golden fields stretching as far as the eye could see. The warriors, now his trusted allies, helped cultivate the land, bringing their skills and wisdom with them. The travelers, once mere strangers, now called the ranch home, each contributing to its success. Thomas's once isolated life had expanded into a community of strong, capable individuals, each of them sharing in the success and the labor. One evening, as Thomas walked through the barn, he was approached by the giant warrior who had stood by him from the very beginning. The warrior, a man who had seen much in his life, looked at Thomas with a knowing smile. "You've done it, Thomas," he said, his voice filled with respect. "You've built something that will last. The land is yours, and the warriors will stand with you for as long as you need us. You've proven that kindness, when backed by strength, can change the course of a life." Thomas nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. He had come a long way from the man who had first stepped onto this land. He had been tested, tried, and in the end, had emerged stronger for it. He had learned that it wasn't the gold or the land that mattered most. It was the people you surrounded yourself with, the trust you earned, and the bonds you forged in the fire of struggle. The following spring, as the first blossoms appeared on the trees and the land came to life once more, Thomas stood with the warriors and travelers, looking out over the ranch. It was a place of peace, a place where his dreams had taken root and flourished. There were still challenges to face, still battles to fight, but Thomas knew that he was no longer alone. He had the strength of his allies beside him, and together, they would face whatever the future held. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the land, Thomas felt a deep sense of gratitude. The ranch was more than just a home. It was a testament to what could be achieved through kindness, hard work, and unwavering resolve. It was a symbol of everything he had fought for and everything he had built. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Thomas knew that his journey was far from over. But for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next with courage, with honor, and with the unwavering belief that he had found his place in this world. In this gripping tale of bravery, kindness, and the untamed spirit of the American West, Thomas, a simple rancher, finds himself thrust into a world of danger and intrigue. His peaceful life is forever changed when a giant warrior, wounded and in need of help, crosses his path. With a heart full of compassion, Thomas gives the warrior his horse, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that will alter his destiny. As word spreads of his kindness, warriors and travelers alike begin to gather around him, forming an unlikely alliance. Together, they defend their land against outlaws and enemies who wish to take what they have worked so hard for. This is one of those unforgettable Western stories where courage and honor come together, showcasing how a single act of kindness can bring about miracles in the harshest of circumstances. Throughout the struggle, Thomas learns what it means to protect what matters most, facing challenges that will test his strength and resolve. From fierce battles to forging lifelong bonds, this is a story that embodies the essence of Western stories, where every twist and turn brings new lessons about loyalty, leadership, and the price of freedom. As the story unfolds, Thomas comes to realize that the true treasures are not the gold and riches, but the community and loyalty he has gained. In the end, he stands tall as a true protector of the land, with a heart full of gratitude for the warriors who stood by him. These Western stories remind us that sometimes the greatest victories are won through unwavering courage and the willingness to fight for what is right, no matter the cost.